What's up, fantasy nerds? Welcome to another episode of the Inking Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rob Santos, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And joining us again today is a special guest whom we've featured before in our Wheel of Time review. Mr. Craig Hanks from the Legendarium Podcast is with us. Craig, what's good, man?
What's up, everybody? I feel like I want a fake applause track going on.
Yeah, Pat, make sure to put that in post. Give him some more work. That's the least he needs to do.
All right.
Craig, you were last with us, I believe, when we were covering, I looked it up. It was The Dragon Reborn.
Dragon Reborn,
It was part 1 and 2, right? I think you were
Yeah.
here for both parts.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and those were actually some of our longest episodes. I think we've had 2 episodes since that have been slightly longer, but we had a lot to talk about.
I don't think today I'm going to run that risk of making you go over, because
It's like-
yeah.
The definition of over is continuously stretching more and more.
Yeah,
and more.
redefined.
Yeah.
When we first started this podcast, we were like, yeah, we're going to do hour-long episodes. And then the first episode was like an hour 10. And the second one was an hour 25. And the third one was an hour 40.
And as we just, fall more and more into our rut, into our stride here, we just, find more and more things to talk about that are relevant. But last time that you were on with us, Craig, we did the Dragon Reborn. We've continued on with everything through the ending of Knife of Dreams. So for today, everybody, we are diving finally into the Brandon Sanderson trilogy of the Wheel of Time, beginning with The Gathering Storm up through Chapter 25, Into Darkness. So at this point, I pass this off to Drew so that he can give us a kindly recap of what we've read for this week. Drew, take it away, dude.
Yeah. So this book picks up pretty directly after the events of Knife of Dreams. We get some kind of recap with Perrin and Fail. Fail kills Massima, finally. And they kind of consolidate everything and leave Malden. Meanwhile, Rand is...
I love that. I'm sorry. Rand is relegated to the meanwhile portion of this synopsis. That's just great. That's great.
He is in the Manor House in Tyr, but very quickly moves to Aradoman, where he reveals his sort of logistical plan for Tarmon Gaidon. But very quickly things start to unravel as food is spoiling, and a bit of treachery from within releases Semiraj from her captivity. She collars Rand, tries to force Rand to kill Min. Rand breaks out by using the true power and balefires Semiraj.
Damn.
So some fireworks in that storyline.
Meanwhile,
Egwene is...
sorry, what other main characters are going to be meanwhiles here?
Oh, they're all meanwhiles.
Oh, okay.
They have been for a few books now.
But yeah, Egwene is doing her thing in the White Tower.
I'm sorry. You can't just gloss over that. This is some of the best stuff in the whole series. Egwene back in the White Tower.
I would say some of the
we'll
best
get to that.
Egwene. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
All right.
But yeah, she's undermining Elida's rule from within. She is establishing rapport with Aes Sedai, and specifically like sitters and heads of Ajaz and Sylviana, and kind of proving her strength as a person and not just buckling under and saying, yes, I'm a novice. And then that's, more or less where we're left at about halfway through this book.
What's Matt doing?
Still
Pissing
getting
off
away
Drew,
from
that's what he's
Nishandran.
doing.
And
Yeah, is that why you didn't want to bring him up? Is that...
I didn't particularly want to bring him up.
But I will do that
we'll
later.
get to that.
We'll get to that later. I'll make sure to do that. Should we jump right into style, though?
Yes, because this is one of the most important books in the series to cover actual writing style.
Okay.
So, Rob, take it away.
Well, I do want to, first off, before we get any further into the weeds here, I want to discuss this epigraph that I love so much at the beginning here. It might be my favorite. I know I made a big case for the Shadow Rising when we got to that epigraph, but oh my god, these have been our days. Oh, just the verbatim, the nuance. It's such a good way to start, and it's such a promising note for what Brandon Sanderson's going to deliver. What'd you guys think?
Yeah, I vividly remember when I first got this book, reading that epigraph and just chills. It spoke with the voice of the fans. What is
That's
it?
a good
They
point.
rain upon us beneath a dead sky, crushing us with their fury, until as one we beg, let it begin.
I hadn't considered that. That's
So
brilliant.
that's very cool. The thing that jumps out to me from the epigraph here is in that second paragraph, the dead are beginning to walk, and some see them, others do not. But more and more, we all fear the night.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where if you've taken a creative writing course or if you've talked about writing, for 10 minutes, you hear this all the time. But if you want to make a point, if you want to make it stick, you do it in monosyllables,
Yes.
right? And this is good prose 101.
Yeah.
Where we all fear the night, and it's so powerful and so strong as just a direct statement. But it's powerful, strong, and colorful too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, vivid imagery in this. And it really sets the scene, especially because we move directly into a Renaud Fanoir. And
Is that the farmer dude?
that is the farmer dude.
The farmer.
And-
Farmer dude is. That's like my version of Meanwhile with the farmer dude.
but yeah,
dude
so
looking at
this
the sky.
is one of the few whole Robert Jordan scenes in this book.
Okay, so I wanted to ask though, like, what about the epigraphs? Do we know if you had any involvement writing the epigraphs, like one or two or three of them, maybe just portions of them? Do we have any idea, or could this be entirely?
I do
Brandon
not.
Sanderson? Okay, that's it.
I have not heard anything as far as like direction on the epigraphs.
That's so cool.
My guess, though, is that at least the first epigraph here is Brandon, because
Yeah,
one of the things that was a hallmark of Robert Jordan's epigraphs was beyond just the effective, powerful prose that Craig noted. There was a lyricism to them. They were often rhyming couplets, things like that. They were poetry.
Yeah,
This is not poetry.
this is a hammer to the face.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And so to me, that felt like something Brandon probably wrote, and that he very specifically wrote it in a different style to, like you said, to drive it home. Like, look, we're not messing around here. No more flowery rhymes. Let it begin.
Should we have actually discussed the foreword? I didn't even consider that until just now. 'Cause he pretty much addresses everything we're going to address in the style point here, at least in some fashion or other. I found it awesome because he does exactly what he promises to do right out of the gate. He said to think of it as the same script being directed by a different director, and I found that really quaint. Like, he shows immediately that he's not kidding around with this epigraph. It was just so good, and as you said, Drew, with this opening. Well, I guess I'll call it the prologue opening scene with Renaud Fanoir, being written by Robert Jordan, is just such an excellent pairing to start us off like on this journey. It's just it's so perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, it is. And that scene specifically brings in all of the imagery we would expect. The gathering clouds, this renewal of a theme that we had from back in Crown of Swords and Path of Daggers, where people are like, the storm is coming. They don't know what the storm is, but they know the storm is coming, and they're being moved to act. The pattern is pulling on their threads, nudging them in the direction it wants, in the direction it needs for all the pieces to be in place for the last battle.
Heck yes. And the wind, our introductory wind, is a little different this time around. Finally, it's interrupted by something.
Yes.
It doesn't just continue on and course through our character's scene and introduce us nicely. As it crosses west into Era Doman, it apparently slams into something unnatural, spawned by the darkness to the north. Like, we can gather that this has been happening already behind the scenes. Like, we had an extreme drought, and then we had an extreme winter. But this is the first time in the series where we get it on page 1. We see that something is deeply wrong with the world. And I felt that, it felt so ominous to me.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
No, I think you're spot on with that. It's there's so much in the writing and in the decisions, the storytelling decisions in this book, to very deliberately signal a shift in the series. Mm-hmm. It's saying that the end is nigh, not just the the war, the last battle is nigh, but the end of the series is at hand. Because when we pull back, you remember Robert Jordan only planned one more book. When he was writing this scene with Renaud Fenoir, he was anticipating that being probably the first scene of the last book. You know? So a lot of these, the directions I imagine that he left for Brandon in the early stages of this book were along that same vein. Like saying, look, we're in the end game now.
I like the phrasing there. Very nicely done. How about pacing? Should we discuss the pacing of this book and how it differs from Robert Jordan's pacing?
Sure.
What's the chapter count in this book versus
I think
Jordan
50,
one?
52.
I believe it's 50.
And how does that compare? Because as I read it, that's one of the things that I remember is, I'm sure you'll have more to talk about with this in the second and third Sanderson books.
Yeah.
But so I was curious about it with this one. I couldn't quite remember.
So there are 50 chapters in this. And it's interesting because that's not an unheard of number for Robert Jordan. Some of the middle of the series, Shadow Rising had like 55.
Yeah.
I think Lord of Chaos had over 60. But in the more recent books, in Knife of Dreams, Crossroads of Twilight, Winter's Heart, Path of Daggers, we were in the 30s.
And because he was stretching those chapters out more.
Yeah, the chapters were much longer, and the books were getting shorter. This book, all three of the Brandon books are among the longest in the series, and but not such an amount longer that you would think, oh, there are 50% more chapters. But Brandon definitely does tend to write shorter chapters. We see it in his Wheel of Time books, other than the infamous Last Battle chapter, of course. But we see it in the Wheel of Time books that he did. We especially see it in the Stormlight Archive, where we have books with 130 chapters.
Yeah.
You know, like that's
Granted,
an insane number. And
25% longer than these ones are. But still, I mean, they're not double the length. It's insane.
Yeah. So I think there's something to the pacing picking up, in part because the chapters are becoming shorter, and it gives, whether this is the substance or not, it gives at least the appearance of movement.
Yeah.
More than when you're stuck in an 8,000 word Elaine chapter.
Yeah.
Craig, pacing? How do we feel, man?
I think Drew has said it. I couldn't say it any better than that. It helps when we marry this idea of increased pacing to what you guys already talked about with the intro, and how you've got all these signals to the reader that this is not the same thing as what you've been reading already.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the foreword or in what do we call it, the epigraph?
Yeah.
There's all these signals, and one of them is things are going faster. You know, even if it's only an appearance, because we do spend a lot of time in certain locations. It's not necessarily that the story is actually moving faster, but just the shorter chapters gives you the impression of, like you said, Drew, more movement. I like the way you said it.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe this is something that manifests in the sort of collective consciousness of the fandom, because even to this day, you'll get conversations about the Brandon books versus the Robert Jordan books, and the biggest thing that rises to the surface is
Matt.
Brandon's books are faster.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that a lot of people say, like, he saved the series. He's the one who got the wheels turning again. You know,
Good.
I disagree with that, especially because Knife of Dreams is so
Good.
bombastic.
I'm
There's
so
much that happens in that book. But this is very much a continuation of that renewed pacing that Robert Jordan established in Knife of Dreams, where instead of these heavy themes in Lord of Chaos through Crossroads of Twilight, where there's miscommunication everywhere, people are being stymied at every turn, they're being bogged down in their pursuit of their goals. Now characters are achieving their goals, and the lines of communication are starting to reopen. People are starting to come back together for the first time since The Dragon Reborn. You know?
Yeah. I'm really, really glad that you actually brought up the discussion among the fandom and what comes first and foremost when they get into this kind of discussion. The pacing of Brandon's being, in my head, it goes immediately quicker. Brandon picks up the pace. That's how I've looked at it over these past few years. But I will say, I'm starting to feel like, especially coming fresh out of Knife of Dreams, as you just covered, Drew, I feel like people either overestimate how much quicker the pace really gets here, or underestimate just how much really was going on in Knife of Dreams. Because that's a mistake that I made.
Let me jump in for... I'm going to represent the casual fans here.
All right.
Look, I love the Wheel of Time. I just don't... I don't know it the way that you guys know it, right?
Hey, man, you might know better than I do.
Well, but I was going to say, I think for the mega fans out there, the people who live and breathe the Wheel of Time constantly,
Drew McCaffreys, yes.
Like the Drew McCaffreys of the world, for instance, I think there's a tendency among some of those people to underestimate or undervalue just how slow the slog is for those who aren't 100% bought in. Okay, and people can rant and rave and disagree with me all they want, but I'm not the only one who says books 8 through 10 maybe depending on your tastes are just incredibly slow. So Knife of Dreams, yes, it does pick up the way you're talking about. I don't think we should discount that at all, but I also don't think that Knife of Dreams by itself washed out that taste of the slog from a lot of people's mouths. And so, when you go to Knife of Dreams, and yes, it does pick up, but it's still, you're like, oh, this Robert Jordan guy, man, he loves to dwell on these certain things. And when we go now to A Gathering Storm, it's a chance for a reader's brain to reset and say, no, it's a new author, so you're able to see that better.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's exactly what it is.
And this was also the biggest gap in real world time in the series. Where, it was... This book came out in, 2009? And Knife of Dreams was 2005.
Right.
That's a 4-year gap. There was a lot of time for people to sort of readjust themselves to the state of the Wheel of Time after Knife of Dreams, and to establish new expectations for what Brandon Sanderson was going to come in with. I also think a part of what may influence that is that we knew it was Brandon Sanderson writing it. They didn't just drop a new book on us and be like, oh, by the way, we had this guy write it.
Yeah, we had a ghostwriter.
From the get-go, everybody knew Brandon Sanderson's the one who's going to finish it. And I know many, many people, upon hearing that news, went straight out and bought Mistborn.
All of his books, yeah.
Heyo.
But especially Mistborn.
Right.
And Mistborn, again, fast-paced. That
at that point moves. It was Well of Ascension, though. I mean...
No, when it was announced, only Mistborn, The Final Empire was out.
No, it was not. It was December of 2007, and Well of Ascension had just come out. It had just been released. Well of Ascension came out a month before that.
Fight.
Are you sure?
I'm 95% sure. I'm not 100, but I'd bet money on it.
I'm not positive of this, but...
Fact down!
Either way, people were going out and reading The Final Empire. They weren't going out and buying The Well of Ascension as their first book to read by Brandon Sanderson. They were reading The Final Empire.
Oh!
And that is a fast-paced book.
August 21st, 2007, Well of Ascension. So Well of Ascension had already been out for 4 months.
Okay.
Doodle dance.
But anyway, my point is that people weren't going out and buying The Well of Ascension. They were buying The Final Empire.
Yeah.
Which is a fast-paced, intense book. And so a lot of people, would read that and say, okay, this is the style we're going to get for the Wheel of Time going forward now. And that's exciting. I mean, it was certainly exciting for me. By pure luck, I had picked up The Final Empire 2 weeks before Robert Jordan died. And I loved it. And then when they announced it was Brandon Sanderson finishing, I was like, oh, heck yeah. I'm going to go buy Elantris now. I got to check this out too. And there was definitely a palpable excitement in the fandom, knowing that Brandon Sanderson, that this guy who can write a fast-paced, intense, action-packed story, like the Final Empire, is the one who's going to be finishing the Wheel of Time.
And I'm sorry, but we should probably also note here that may have excited the fans, but that's not what got him the job.
That is also very true.
The first half of Elantris got him the job.
Yep.
Wait, what?
And yep. And so Harriet read the first half of Elantris. Nobody knows quite how it, how he came across her radar. Some people theorize that Tor said, "Hey, I've got a guy."
She said that, at least from what I know of Harriet, she said she read his eulogy.
See, that's what.
That's right.
But somebody sent her the eulogy.
Okay,
I don't know who it was, but she read that and she was like, "Wow, that was beautiful." And then she went and picked up Elantris.
So she picks up Elantris, reads the first half, and says, "Yep, he's the guy.
Yeah.
Sign him."
God, see, this is very similar, but also very distinctly different to what I heard. I heard it had been that she had read his eulogy, she was touched by his eulogy, and then she had been so impressed by the Final Empire that she decided
she did not read the Final Empire. It was Elantris.
Okay.
And
really? After Elantris?
I'm just going to take this opportunity. Yes. I'm sorry to just say Elantris is amazing. It is a wonderful book, and people who hate on it need to calm down and realize that it's amazing. Even if you don't think it's the best Brandon book out there, it's in the 98th percentile of fantasy books.
Preach.
I agree with pretty much everything you just said. I know Drew is such a huge fan of Elantris, particularly for the manner in which it focuses on the characters more than it does on the spectacle and the awe.
Yep.
And the journey of the characters themselves. For me, Elantris is my least favorite fantasy book.
I didn't mean to totally derail this. I just, I want everybody listening out there. Just stop listening to Rob. Stop listening to whoever else. And it's okay. I'm giving you permission to love Elantris. That's what I'm doing here.
I guess
now we can go back to Robert Jordan. That's fine.
Hang on. I'm not. One more thing. I guess the reason I'm focusing on this so much is because I'm so flabbergasted to learn that Harriet made that call based on Brandon's abilities
because Elantris is phenomenal.
As a character story, it's phenomenal. It definitely is.
What I think what really did it for her was the voice in Elantris. It was the ability to create a world that felt mythological and lived in, that attracted her to Brandon, that made her think, this is a guy who can step into the Wheel of Time and handle the world.
Yeah. I mean, I'll still say Brandon Sanderson's worst book is still far better than a lot of authors' best books will ever be. Like, it's still
that's definitely true.
Book.
Calamity is better than a lot of Sword of Truth books.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a loaded statement. Right. Okay, continuing on.
Hot takes around.
Remember that time we all read The Gathering Storm and then talked about that?
Yeah.
Hey guys, why do your episodes keep getting longer?
I couldn't tell you, man. It couldn't have anything to do with the copious amounts of beer we like to ingest on the show as well.
Yeah, definitely not that either.
I do want to take this style discussion because I still have a lot of points about style, but I have something in a completely different direction I want to talk about. And I know Drew's going to be chomping at the bit to get at me for this one. I think it's time that we have a brief discussion, if we can make anything brief, about the pronunciation of a particular Forsaken's name. Okay? We've mentioned this in the past, fleetingly, but now that she's kind of a centerpiece of a lot of the problems surrounding Rand right now, let's talk about the Lady of Pain.
Semirog?
Thank you! Oh my god, thank you! Oh god. Craig?
There's an E on the end.
I know this.
Yes,
okay, let me finish. All through my teenage years and my young adult life, I pronounced her name in the way I pronounced it Semiraj for my whole life. But lately, after hearing the audiobook, Drew, I'm starting to like the simple aesthetic of that hard G, Semirog. It sounds far more demonic that way. It's like unholy. It's got this note of this. It's
like a Balrog.
Yes, Balrog, Semirog.
Yeah, but there's no E on the end of Balrog.
Doesn't? Okay, listen, okay, here's my retort to that. Well, first off, let's think about what the Forsaken represent. They represent demons. It sounds more demonic royalty in a way. But what you just said there, Drew, it's pronounced, it's got like the E at the end of it. If you're going to tell me that the letters T-A-I-M can be pronounced Taim, then you have to give me something here for maybe swapping out a hard G.
Well, no, that's just phonetics. That's simple phonetics. No, but if we're gonna go with there's an E on the end, so it has to be a soft G, then it should be semirage, right?
Well, Drew pronounces it semirage. I've heard you say it a few times on the show, which reminds me of
when
hemorrhage.
I'm talking, I would just say semirage.
Which again, I don't like that at all. That's my least favorite of all three of these pronunciations.
So I wish I had like one of the earlier books in the series with me, because in the glossary they have pronunciations, like phonetically written out pronunciations for the words, and that's where I got my pronunciation of semirage.
But you can't. But you also say Egwene when it's pronounced Egwene.
Because I didn't need to look in the glossary to pronounce Egwene.
Apparently you do, though.
Well, yeah, but but that's my point. Is like I only looked it up in the glossary if like a character had a really weirdly challenging name, like Swan.
Swan is.
I had no idea. Like I wanted to say like Siuan, what? And then I looked. I was like, oh, Swan. Okay.
Yeah, I said Siuan.
Or Kyrien. Like I wanted to say Kerheen. And then I looked in the glossary. I was like, oh, Kyrien. Okay.
Oh, interesting. But
things like that.
I still want to point out that for the first 15 years of reading The Wheel of Time, I said Semirage. But I'm liking I like Semirog now. It just sounds so demonic and unnatural and twisted. It's horrific.
I feel like it doesn't do her enough justice. Like Semirage to me sounds so much more sinister than because like Semirog is like it's like muddy and like glottal and like that's not her.
What are you talking about?
She's
a lady of pain.
Yeah, but she's so precise and deft and like.
So basically, what you're saying is she is the sponsor of the last 5 minutes of this podcast because I am just in misery.
This podcast brought to you by Semirage.
For Drew's deep penetrating lore.
Yes, yes.
Oh man,
I don't know. I still
we're off to a flying start.
I still don't like this. Is fantasy. Robert Jordan could say it's pronounced banana pie if he wants to. Like it's his right to do that. I don't agree with that, but I like just now. I'm finally starting to tip towards Semirog, but Semirage was how I pronounced it for like the first 15 years, and anybody who says that is going to be like, okay, well they're probably saying it the right way, I guess. I'll admit that.
Well, as long as you don't say Mogadine, then we're fine.
Mogadine, god damn it.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about Brandon's dialogue. We very briefly kind of covered this already. Particularly coming out of Crossroads of Twilight, where I was frustrated with a lot of the politicking, the intricacies. Brandon's got this blunt, direct, unapologetic approach to how his characters are addressing one another that I found really refreshing. Like the interrogation of Semirage really exhibits this. I will show you the weave someday. Like, Jesus Christ. So Brandon's dialogue, yay or nay? I figure it's going to be yay, but for a lot of people that like his style also say they might not necessarily agree that it fits with the tone of the Wheel of Time. I don't necessarily agree, but I want to get both of your inputs on that.
Okay, I will say one thing on this, and this is the only thing that I will say. A lot of people complain about Brandon's handling of Matt, and that's fine. That's where my brain goes when you're talking about the dialogue here. Yeah. I can't really comment on the other characters so much. Brandon took Matt and tried to make him the comic relief that he uses in a lot of his other books. Mm-hmm. And while Matt is funny and clever, he is not C-3PO. Right. He's not the comic relief here. And that's the only thing about it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, dialogue-wise.
Yeah, so that kind of leads perfectly into what I was going to say about this, is that I don't think there's an easy catch-all yay or nay. Brandon had an easier time with the voices of some characters than he did with others.
Sure.
Totally understandable.
Characters like Cadswain, he did very well. Characters like Elida, like Rand, like Perrin, very, very well. Some other characters like Matt, Talmanis, Avienda, so well.
Avienda, agree. Yeah, Matt and Avienda, Talmanis. I see how he changed it. Sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, well, and we're gonna keep track of this as we go into Towers of Midnight and A Memory of Light, because he gets better. I think he develops a better understanding of how those characters talk, not only speaking dialogue, but talking their narration on the page. Because voice, in a limited third-person perspective, voice extends beyond just the dialogue in things inside quotations, but everything that is written is filtered through the lens of your point of view character. And so Brandon really struggled in The Gathering Storm to grasp the lenses of certain characters, while others I thought he took to wonderfully, and he really nailed down the essences of those characters. And to me, in this book especially, what he did the best was Rand, Cadswain, and Nynaeve.
Okay. So, before we get on to Craig's thoughts about the dialogue there, there's actually a question I just thought of asking you right now, Drew. Are there any characters that you might be tempted to say Brandon wrote better than Robert Jordan did?
Ooh.
See, that's a very dangerous question, because then that begs, the question of who these characters really are. If they are a Robert Jordan character, surely he knew best. But are there any characters that you feel like were more fleshed out, more justified in Brandon's hands than, for example, Robert Jordan had been treating them previously?
Oh, man.
Maybe give you some time to think on that. Come back to that by the end of the podcast.
I think the immediate place my mind goes is Rand.
Okay,
this may be a little reactionary to the limited amount of Rand we've gotten in the last 2 books, where Rand only had 5 or 6 chapters in Knife of Dreams, and only 1 chapter in the epilogue in Crossroads of Twilight. There's so much more focus on him in this book, and he does a phenomenal job of developing Dark Rand. Of all the things Brandon Sanderson did in The Wheel of Time, I think his depiction of Rand in The Gathering Storm is the best. It is the finest thing he did, stepping into Robert Jordan's shoes to finish the series.
Noise. Now let's give Craig his chance to talk about the dialogue.
Well, let me kind of riff on that a little bit. The reason, because I agree wholeheartedly that his treatment of Rand in this book is fantabulous. And here's what it is. I'm going to cast your minds in your Wayback Machine. Go all the way back to book 2. In my mind, probably the most effective bit of writing that Jordan ever did. For me. Okay, yeah, everybody's going to have their own opinions, right?
Can
but for
guess?
Me... yeah, do it.
The Blade Master duel?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
No. The best bit of writing that Robert Jordan ever did for me was Egwene Collard.
Yeah.
There is nothing so horrifying, and just the abject terror that he's able to get through with Egwene in that situation, and how that affects her character through the whole series. We don't really have anybody Collard after book 2, at least not any characters that we're following. And then finally, Brandon gives us Rand in a collar, and he is able to recapture and possibly improve upon what Robert Jordan did with Egwene, and give it to Rand. And so, because we've followed these characters through all these books, and at least for me, it was so effective a piece of writing that it stuck with me, with little reminders here and there. This is one of those things that drives Egwene's character, this collaring that she experienced in book 2. But it was so effective, and the imagery and the emotion from those chapters were so effective that when Rand gets there, Brandon Sanderson knocked that bit out of the park.
Well, we have seen something very similar with the collaring before now, and that is with the mind trap that Morden is placing on Sindain and Moghedien. But we're not rooting for those characters.
No,
it's not,
we don't feel the horror for them that we do for our heroes.
Well, I mean, damn, honestly, the mind trap. Between the mind trap and the Adom, I'd rather the Adom or the Domination Band, since I'm male. But like, but we're not rooting for Sindain. We're not rooting for Moghedien. We are rooting for Egwene, and it is horrifying. I do see what you're saying about those points of view that we got in The Great Hunt. Those were tough to read, and so seeing that brought in full force against Rand was intimidating.
So, that chapter, the last that could be done, when Rand has the domination band put around his neck, will always stay with me. The memories I have of reading this book for the first time and getting to that scene, I don't think anything in the books that I had to wait for in the Wheel of Time, I don't think any single scene provided such a visceral reaction in me, a physical reaction to it. I was shocked. I was horrified.
You get that little feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Oh,
like,
yeah. And for me, like, I'm pretty open with the fact that I don't particularly like Min. Holy cow, was this horrifying to see Rand being forced to kill her, basically. And then of course he doesn't quite finish choking her out, but the descriptions of her like crying, and
loving
and his
him
hand
as
around
he choked her
throat.
Yeah,
That was just horrible. And going into the style of this, I want to point out, when you look at the page, short paragraphs, one-line paragraphs.
Yep. Something you can't get through audiobook, by the way.
It's there's this staccato, frenetic feeling to the words on the physical page because it's written like this. You could have him say, "This can't be happening. I've killed her. I'm mad. Ilyena." You could have all of that in one paragraph. Instead, he breaks that into 4 different lines. And that gives each of those lines a greater gravity. And so it's this deliberate decision to not only write these heavy, intense, emotional beats in the scene, but to physically structure your sentences in a way to drive it home. It was a brilliant, brilliant work on Brandon's part.
Yeah, they definitely stand more distinct from one another when he delivers them one at a time. They're not being lost in a wall of text that you see sometimes. I definitely loved what Brandon did during this scene, and this was something I had saved for my Rand-centric discussion, but I'll take one of these points out and follow up on what Drew just said there, because I think it follows nicely. The last that could be done, this entire chapter, I wrote, just what a scene. I can't believe how amazing it was, and when I reached it for the first time, I think this is the point at which I formally decided that I liked what Brandon was doing, and I approved what Brandon was doing with the Wheel of Time. Yep. There was so much power. There was so much destruction of Rand's character in this final step into his journey of becoming Darth Rand, if you'll permit me that phrase there. Like, realizing that he has access to the true power, like, it not only changed everything that I thought was possible, but my opinion of Rand's journey and where it's taking him, like, I was terrified by the implication in that as a new reader, and I can only commend Brandon Sanderson for achieving that.
Yeah, I vividly remember after reading this scene thinking legitimately for the first time, is Rand going to turn to the shadow?
Or is there at least a danger of that happening?
Oh, I
hadn't considered that even as a possibility.
I very much felt that there was I could see it happening, and that was never the case before this.
Yeah. Craig?
And that's great writing. If you can make your reader think that the main hero
12
in
books
a heroic fantasy, 12 books in, could in fact become the villain, that's pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah. No, definitely. Anything to add, Craig, before I finish off this style discussion?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I just have one more style discussion point here. We can move on straight into Randall Thor, which sounds like a great point to start with. But really quickly, before we do, I want to talk about Brandon's utilization of point of view, because, Drew, you've been hammering this about Robert Jordan for the past 20, 25 episodes, just off the top of my head. But Chapter 10 of The Gathering Storm is one of my favorite sequences in all of Brandon's Wheel of Time work. The first meeting between Rand and Rodel Ituralde.
Yeah.
The way the great captain looks at him, thinks about him, unconsciously comes to respect him. From his point of view, it's downright intimidating for the reader on Iturralda's behalf. What a scene. This is a scene that rivals, for me, Rand's epic day that we talked about during Crown of Swords. When he meets with the sea folk to establish the bargain, and then he quells the rebels in Tyr just because he's feeling really good that day. But context is important, though, because in Crown of Swords, that was a day of triumph. In The Gathering Storm, it's tense, desperation. But from point of view, choosing to give us this scene from Iturralda's point of view, would you agree, Drew, specifically, since you've hammered on point of view so much before, that this is Brandon absolutely nailing one of Jordan's signature strengths as a writer?
100%. 100%. It's...
Well, we know that Brandon idolized Robert Jordan to a certain degree, and so it makes sense that as Brandon was developing himself as a writer, that was one of the things that he consciously or unconsciously worked with was strategic point of view.
And we feel he accomplished that, perhaps.
And I think this is something that he, to compare and contrast with the Stormlight Archive, Brandon is doing some very deliberate things with point of view in the Stormlight Archive. But he's limited himself for good reason in the Stormlight Archive, because he wants to avoid some of the pitfalls and major criticisms that stories like The Wheel of Time and A Song of Ice and Fire rightfully receive. And that is, the character bloat. That you start getting so many different points of view from so many characters who are so minor that nobody really cares. And Brandon is limiting that purposely in the Stormlight Archive. But in here, because it is already established that you can just have so many different points of view, that it's easy for him to write a scene from Rodel Iturralda's point of view, where normally, in the hands of another author, or in the hands of Brandon in the Stormlight Archive, would have to be from Rand's point of view.
Interesting. Well, that wraps up the entirety of my style points. Anything else that we want to add before we dive into Rand al'Thor?
No, but I just want to talk about that phrasing.
I was wondering if somebody was going to pick up on that. So, we have finally arrived at Darkest Rand. Things
almost
particularly... No, I don't know, man. At the very end here, the last that could be done. Does it get darker than this?
I think there's an argument to be made.
Natron Sparrow, perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. But things are just not going well for him. Or the world as a whole. And he's really beginning to reflect this in a way that we haven't seen before. To begin, it must be so irritating, just beyond irritating, to perform a feat, nay, a miracle, like the cleansing of the source, and to still have all these other noobs doubting you. I was a little affronted on Rand's behalf.
You got to just man up and have your master plan, remember?
Right. Yeah, let's see, this is exactly what I'm going to be going on to right here. Check this out, Drew. I was a little affronted on Rand's behalf during his conversation with Hareen of the Atha on Muir. I so badly wanted him to just pull a Juggernaut and just be like, bitch, do you know who I am? This is a moment where Rand the man with his master plan would have been particularly enjoyable.
Sorry. Was that an X-Men 3 reference?
It may or may not have been.
All right, yeah, I should probably go.
Actually, I believe it was a reference to the parody that came out of the X-Men animated show directly before that X3 was then parodying of the parody afterwards. Did you ever see that cartoon? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch! No, that's off track. Let's talk about that later.
Anyway.
Sorry.
But Rand the man with his master plan would have been so awesome right here in this moment.
Craig,
talking
are you
to Hareen.
familiar with this? With Rand the man and his master plan?
No.
Oh!
I mentioned this on a previous episode, but there was an old Wheel of Time fan site called blacktower.net, and they had a humor section. And one of the humor pieces on there was this pretty poorly written, poorly edited short story called Rand a Man and His Master Plan. That was just hysterical, where it was basically Rand just saying, you know what, screw this, screw all of you, we're going to do things my way, and if you don't do things my way, I'm going to bail fire you. And he just goes around from country to country and goes to Shan-Chan and just whips them all into shape, and anybody who doesn't listen to him gets balefired, basically.
It's basically Rand saying to every single person who disagreed with him exactly what they all want Rand to say, exactly what we all just want to hear Rand say.
And then the last battle culminates in a battle of hungry, hungry hippos.
I haven't been that far into it yet. Damn. Although I loved his interaction with Ashanti.
So great.
Oh my god.
Nynaeve rips her braid out of her scalp.
Yeah, we're gonna have to send that one to Craig after this.
I'm reading it right now, actually.
Oh, yes. Wonderful. We'll have to post that link in our Facebook group.
Yeah, we referenced it before, but we haven't actually explained it too much, I don't think.
Yeah. But I very much understand what you're saying with that, Rob, where it's... You reach a certain point with Rand where there's a level of exasperation that you almost cannot believe that these people are still being resistant, knowing, like, this guy is the Dragon Reborn, the last battle is starting, and they're still, obfuscating things and stonewalling Rand's plans, and, like, yeah.
Well, I mean, to your earlier point, Drew, we finally get a glimpse in this part that Rand very well could turn to the shadow.
Yeah.
He is Dark Rand at this point, and so I'm going to go ahead and cut some of these characters some slack and say, look, if there's this prophecy, and this is not a biblical prophecy, like, this is not necessarily the Messiah coming to save us all. It could go either way. And they're watching him make these
Wait, they know that
really,
though?
really...
The prophecies don't say that.
Well, so what the prophecies say
That's
is he will save you and destroy
you.
Yeah.
And so, there is definitely some headspace that can take up for these people.
So people get really upset at Egwene or Tuon for not towing the line with Rand, and I'm like, look, you got to look at it from their perspective.
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
I can see that being justifiable from the point of view of somebody who doesn't know any better. Like we see earlier in the series, that there's a lot of people who, from backwater villages, for example, we might have seen it during the Ravens prologue in Eye of the World, don't quote me on that, but there are a lot of uneducated people who simply confuse the dragon with the Dark One. That kind of thing, So, but for people who have been around him, who have been interacting with him, who know his role in the prophecies, who are dealing with him as a foreign ruler, and like somebody like Hareen Din Togara Two Winds should not be doubting him. Somebody maybe from like a backwater village in Murundi who has never even heard of the dragon. Okay, I can see that, but from somebody like her. I know I expected a lot more out of her in terms of how much she trusts Rand, or at least how much faith she has in what he says.
Mm-hmm. I remain unconvinced.
Well, I mean, this just goes back to point of view. What we've talked about so much in this is how, it's easy to fall victim to the point of view trap. When we're in Rand's head, we're going to be frustrated because Rand is frustrated. And when we're in, Egwene's head, we get frustrated about the things she's frustrated about. And so it's not always easy as a reader to pull yourself out of that point of view and consider other perspectives on a situation.
Going on with Rand, though, I want to ask a question, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. But Rand is... He's finally completing this journey into an official tyrant, or maybe just conqueror is the word that I want to use, because what he does here is he sends the Aiel to capture the Domani Merchant Council.
Yeah.
Now this is an outright conquering move. Now, even before when he stormed Ilion, he was still doing so under the premise of ousting Samael and liberating them from the fist of one of the Forsaken. But here, he's only operating on the faintest hunch that Greendal is in Era Doman. So how do we feel about this move?
Well, I mean, he's certainly Dark Rand. I mean,
right? Now, is this the first time he's done?
Are you looking for us to excuse what he's doing?
No. First, I'm asking: is it the first time we've actually seen this kind of a conquering move? Because I can't think of another one earlier than this. But then, going on from that, I do want to ask if we agree with a move like this.
What about Ilion?
But Ilion, like he was Rob conquering. He was liberating.
He was, liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he knows for a fact that Samael was Lord Brand. In Era Doman, he only has like the tiniest hunch that Greendal has to be out here somewhere. All these events have her fingerprints all over them. He doesn't have any concrete evidence that the Forsaken is ruling there or ruining these people's lives. But he still sends the Aiel not to negotiate, but to capture the Domani Merchant Council. I'm just asking about the morality of that move in particular. Even if you agree with it, if you think it was necessary, just what do you think of Rand's decision to do that? And is this officially where he decides, all right, I'm going to do whatever is necessary. I'm now a conqueror.
Well, I think we have a tendency as modern audiences to impose our own... what am I trying to say? Our own preferences on our heroes, right? And so when we see Rand is a ruler, right? He's the Dragon Reborn. He is in charge. He's one of the elite. He's one of the damn 1%ers, right?
The elite, yes.
And we look at that and we go, well, but we want democracy. We want him to sit down and talk to Egwene, and we want him to talk to Tuon or whatever other world leaders, and come to an agreement, figure something out. Where in reality, it's the situation and the cultural implications involved here may not allow for that sort of thing. And so, while I don't like seeing Rand the autocrat, at a certain point, it's like he knows, in a way that you want all these other characters to know, that the last battle is here, and he needs to have as many banners under his flag as he can. He needs to take territory and command armies, and if some pissant merchant council is getting in my way, take him out.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
This is a trust in Rand thing, is what you're saying, yeah?
Right. And so, like I said, I mean, this is Dark Rand, and so from my perspective, it's understandable that people would look at that and be really uneasy.
Yeah.
But from Rand's perspective, it makes perfect sense to unite them at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
As a necessity.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Anything? I mean, I'll give you guys a chance to talk about Rand. I have a lot of points here to still get out of the way, but let's hear something.
You go, man.
What do you want to talk about?
Yeah,
you go again?
You run with this. I mostly got out of the way everything I wanted to say about Rand. So.
Okay, so a place to begin this chapter. A place to begin. It's everything I wanted to get during Crossroads of Twilight, during a lot of Knife of Dreams, even. All right, so there's a lot of Rand in Knife of Dreams, but it's a lot of setting things up. It's like he's beginning to pull things together for the last battle. But here we have Rand directly confronting what he has to do, directly thinking about his task and thinking about his options, like realizing that he must break the seals. That was a big moment for me. That was terrifying. What about you guys?
I feel like in a way I'm kind of getting back into the style discussion here, but one of the things that Robert Jordan does is he puts a lot of thought processes and stuff, not always. I mean, his books, he wrote 11 books for a reason, but a lot of times he'll put it into subtext. And that's one thing that Brandon does in this book is he takes the subtext and just makes it text.
Yeah.
So that you can actually kind of figure out what it is Rand is thinking as he goes through all these decisions.
Yeah,
Takes
and
the subject and makes it text.
I can see how some people might say like that's a criticism of Brandon Sanderson. I don't think it is, because it's refreshing. It's something that we needed to finally get from Rand, because going back to the Shadow Rising, when Rand is studying the prophecies of the dragon, he doesn't tell us what his plans are. Anytime he's discussing his plans, it's because Robert Jordan's so freaking good with point of view. It's in Egwene's point of view. It's in Matt's point of view. Like, it's in Warren's point of view. It's like, it's never given to us in a situation where we can just get Rand's thoughts on what he's planning. It's all shrouded in mystery, and we have to piece together his actions to figure out what his goal is. And here, it's no longer that. It's Warren Rand's head. Rand is putting those pieces together for us.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. And That pretty much wraps up my Randall Thor points of view. Except for the exile of Cadswain. Jesus Christ, I went back to
That's
my
the
own
second
teenage
time you've done
pronunciation.
that.
Sorry?
And everybody in these books is suddenly Italian. I don't know what's wrong
Yeah,
with
no. I used to pronounce it that way as a teenager. It kind of just slipped out again. But he exiles
have no idea.
Cadswain, and he promises to kill her if he should ever see her face again. Like, wow. Even though I hated Cadswain at this point when I first read this, never had I been so disturbed to get exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
The ambivalence that I had about this scene and that I still have about this scene are just extraordinary. So,
Yeah.
that wraps up everything I
Okay.
have to say about Randall Thor.
Cool. Who do you want to move on to?
Egwene?
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, because I want to hear what Craig's got to say first. Craig, do you want to start us off?
I love Egwene.
Okay.
I love Egwene.
Okay. Just in general.
Okay. I'm done. That's all. Is that
Okay.
not enough analysis for you guys?
It's
No. Look, this is one of the reasons I love Egwene is because of this book, and I frankly I enjoy her character throughout the entire series. That's not to say that I love every single thing that she does, but I love her character. But this is Egwene in this book is a bit like, okay, as long as we're going back and talking about Brandon's other stuff, it's a bit like reading some of the characters in Elantris. And Drew and I were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier today. One of the things I love about Elantris is that it's not about character development, but it's about character testing in a lot of situations where you have these characters who are already kind of where they need to be for this story and for the trials they're about to face, and then hell on earth gets thrown at them and you see what happens, right? And that's what we get with Egwene here, where what's the most unthinkable thing that could happen for her?
She gets collared.
Elida gets her hands on her. She's prisoner. She's captive. She's literally imprisoned and told to renounce her claim and all this stuff. Well, we've had a bunch of Egwene character development for 11 books, and now, I mean, not that it hasn't been put to the test before, but now this is the ultimate Egwene test. And I would say even more so, if you don't mind if I spoil a little bit going forward.
Go for it.
She's going to be a big part of the last battle, and I think it's later in this book with the surprise attack by the Shan Chan and all that stuff. Like, there will be more exciting, quote unquote, exciting things that happen, but this moment with her imprisoned by Elida and going through, standing up to the Red Aja and all that through this book, this is the point at which she is most put to the test, and she passes the test with flying colors. And I think some people might find it boring, or they didn't like Egwene to begin with, and so they don't like this section because it concentrates so much on her. But I think it's so satisfying to me after 11 books of her character development to see that finally put to the test, and to, like I say, satisfying is a great word for it for me, to watch her go through it.
The White Tower is her crucible.
Yes.
And
Good word for it.
So last week in our, or was it 2 weeks ago? I don't remember where we cut off in Knife Dreams. But anyway, we talked about Honey in the Tea. The one Egwene chapter in Knife of Dreams.
That was part 1.
And how, in my opinion, that is the finest chapter of Egwene in the entire series. It is phenomenal writing. It is everything good about Egwene is on display, on full display. She is just brilliant in all aspects. The themes of that continue into The Gathering Storm, and this is her true testing ground. And this is where her final form, so to speak, comes to fruition. It's where she goes Super Saiyan when the Shan Chan attack the tower. But the only reason that I don't like it as much in this book as I did in Knife of Dreams is because, and I'm not sure if this is a Brandon Sanderson failing or a Robert Jordan plotting failing,
or a Drew McCaffrey failing.
it gets cheapened a little bit because the Aes Sedai around her are so stupid.
Okay.
Her achievements don't hit home as well because like, she barely even has to work. Like, when she meets with the white sitters, these are, like, the women who are supposed to be the epitome of logical Aes Sedai.
Right. Could you not argue?
Their entire conversation is bereft of logic. And so, it's frustrating to me because I saw Egwene being set up for all of this glory, where her versatility and her the fact that she was never pigeonholed into an Aja gives her the ability to engage with and overcome the ideals of all of the other Ajas, and how they've become so focused on one thing that they're short-sighted, and she can see beyond that, and she can outmaneuver them because of it. But ultimately, she beats them in this book because they're stupid. Like,
could you not argue though that that's the Aes Sedai testing her more than actually needing help?
No, I that's not at all what it is. The whole thing is set up as, like, her triumphing in these arguments over them, when the arguments themselves are, like, flawed and illogical. And it's like give her something of substance to achieve.
Okay.
Because yes, she achieves, but it's not as good as it could have been. And that's my frustration. Like, I still like Egwene in this book for the most part, but I just it didn't hit home for me with the expectation I had coming out of her brief time in Knife of Dreams, where it is just unmitigated glory.
Okay.
Like, so that's my only real criticism of Egwene in this book, if you can, like, call it criticism of her, because it's not. It's criticism about either the characters around her or how those characters were written. So.
Well, I'll follow up on that, and I'll say, for me, I'm leaning a lot more on Craig's side of the fence for this particular discussion.
I don't feel like we're on opposite side of the fence here, but yeah, no, I get you.
This, for me, is no question, bar none, unequivocally, without peer and leaving no doubt in my mind, my favorite Wheel of Time Egwene. Knife of Dreams was decent. Drew, you nailed it on the head. Knife of Dreams Egwene I found to be palatable and enjoyable, and I looked forward to what she had coming. And to a lesser extent, I liked her a lot in Lord of Chaos, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But for me, watching her step up her pace in her confrontations with Elida, seeing her directly condemn this woman more brazenly and logically when not in her presence as well. Like, Egwene is a total badass during these scenes for the most part. Like, it's not hard to believe that this is the Egwene that discovered the party leaving Emond's Field with Moiraine and Land back in the Eye of the World, and demanded to ride along. Not decided, but demanded to ride along. It's surreal, but it's appropriate. Like, despite some of the gripes that I had and that Drew had with Egwene for the middle portion of this series, and for the end portion that I will have. The Gathering Storm is the only book that I can honestly say excites me about Egwene's plotline, and when I was reading these, I was excited to jump back into them. So, this is my favorite Egwene.
There's something to that for sure. Like, obviously, as I've said, Honey in the Tea is my favorite Egwene chapter in the whole series, but, like, of all these Egwene chapters, there are maybe a handful that I look forward to reading when I sit down to do a reread, and several of them are in this book. A Visit from Varen Sedai, The Tower Shakes, The Tower Stands.
I loved her discussion with Suana, like the way that she just subtly kind of offers this suggestion of, hey, maybe be seen publicly enjoying one another's company, taking dinner together. Like, it was subtle, but it was brilliant. Like, she offers a neat solution to a variety of problems. I don't think they were particularly easy, because I don't think I could have found situations around them, or solutions around them. But she's still unrelenting in her poise and her confidence during these scenes too. Like, this, it's kind of hard to see Egwene Alvear through this mask that she's putting on as the Amerlin, but I really like it, and I feel like she's more competent than I expected her to be when I read for the first time that, hey, you are going to be the next Amerlin seat. I wasn't expecting to see her be this good at it. So, like, I mean, I love this Egwene. This is my favorite Egwene.
Cool. Okay. Do you have anything else on Egwene, or shall we move on?
Let me take a sit here. I found her to be a bit hypocritical, though, when she was talking to Ciene's group about the Black Aja, and she was like, oh my god, you demanded an oath of obedience?
Yep.
I mean, she did the exact same thing. Was it Morel that she demanded an oath of obedience?
And Misao?
And Nisao, yeah.
Yeah.
The epic one-liner, though, the one that's all Brandon Sanderson, when she confronts Elida at the height of her confrontation.
Yeah.
I'd call you a dark friend, but I suspect the dark one would be embarrassed to associate with you. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't write down word for word, but damn, girl. God damn. And it felt a little weird to cheer for a character for whom you've been rooting to be beaten senseless. But what a victory that beating was. And it did nothing but vindicate her in every way.
Mm-hmm. And undermined Elida at the same time.
And it's followed up by the fact that Shiriam, her point of view, she gets the visit from the Forsaken, and they're like, okay, she's not the puppet we've been looking for, so now she's got to go. And that just felt like the cherry on the icing on the cake for me. At that point, I knew that Egwene was kicking all of the ass that she appeared to be kicking. So, that wraps up my discussion on Egwene.
Cool. So I don't have a ton to say about Perrin or Matt that we haven't already said.
Okay.
Neither did Brandon.
Yeah. I mean, because their book is Towers of Midnight. But I do want to say, go Fail.
Oh, yeah, for killing Massima?
For killing Massima. Just, it was, it's a continuation of Fail's assertiveness and the kind of the initiative and the agency that she built up and grasped in Knife of Dreams.
Okay.
How she recognizes the threats around Perrin and the things that are messing with Perrin, and when she knows that Perrin either won't or isn't capable of addressing them himself, she's just going to say, all right, I'm taking it into my own hands. I'm going to clean up this mess by myself. And she does that. And man, it was so beautiful reading this book. And like, I mean, what is that? Like 20 pages into the book, and Massima's just like, oh, dead. You're like, yes.
So you didn't find that dissatisfying?
No, it was wonderful.
Okay.
I found it satisfying, but not as satisfying as I'd hoped it to be, because I wanted it to be at like the end of a book, like the result of something big, which I guess it was, but I don't know. I felt like they would have been better
at a certain point,
at the end of Knife of Dreams.
I remember when I was reading these Brandon books for the first time, and we've had 11 books of the story expands, and then it expands, and it expands, and it expands, and it expands, and then finally, in Knife of Dreams, it keeps expanding. And so, well, you know what I mean. Anyway, so Brandon comes in, it's like, what are you gonna do? Yeah. There are so many threads to wrap up.
Brandon
oh my gosh. And so what does
knuckles.
He do? He takes, he's like, hold my root beer. And he just axes Massima in the first 20 pages.
Yeah.
And so that's what I got from that, is like, oh, you know what? We don't have time for this clown anymore.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get rid of him.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense narratively for him to die in the aftermath of Malden.
Yeah.
Because so many of his plans hinged on Malden.
Yeah.
And so, like, everything was falling apart anyway.
Yeah.
So, of course, like, he needed to get cleaned up.
It's a convenient way to check off that list, that one point on that monumental list that Brandon Sanderson had there when he was taking on a project of this size, for sure. I want to discuss Nynaeve really briefly. Can we?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I
Always.
loved...
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig? You said you were going to say something?
Go on. I love Nynaeve.
I loved
we stand
Nynaeve's like borderline diatribe against the Aes Sedai, just this hierarchy of deference. That's a mouthful, Jesus. But she's so right. Like, so often the women hailed as the greatest Aes Sedai to ever live are not women who typically fall into the Aes Sedai stereotype behavior. I think that's something that I want to say Rand mentions at one point later in the series, or somebody does at least when they're talking about Nynaeve. It's kind of foggy at this point, but it's for this reason that I love Nynaeve as much as I do. I've said it so many times during our journey through the Wheel of Time, but I'll say it again for the first time since Craig's reappearance. I love Nynaeve. When you left me off last time, I hated Nynaeve. For the first 100 reads, I hated Nynaeve. All through my childhood, I was such a Moiraine fanboy. We did discuss this. I know we did.
Yeah.
I railed against Nynaeve, and I know a lot of fans being like young testosterone-driven males kind of did. She was so close to Rand in age that it felt just beyond patronizing or matronizing, whatever. Her behavior in the middle third of this series, it really irked me. I ranted about her behavior during the travels with Vale and Luca's menagerie. But starting around Winter's Heart, as she leaves Egwene, and the tower,
Elaine's radius of suck.
Right, and Elaine's radius of suck is no longer a factor, and she starts to follow Ryan, and she starts to trust in him. I love this woman. I don't think I've come around so hard on a character, with the possible exception of Cadsuane. I love Cadsuane. But now, I mean, I just want to I want to end this segment with a statement that I'm going to regret in the future, okay? I've said this before, boys. I said Moiraine is my waifu. And I pushed pretty hard to make that.
But all right.
I pushed pretty hard to make that an episode title too at one point, but never ended up choosing titles for episodes. But if Moiraine is my waifu, Nynaeve is my bae. There, I said it. It's done, and it can't be taken back.
Like I immediately regret that you said that.
Yes, and that'll fulfill your millennial jargon quota for the day.
Knew that was coming, and I thought about, like, 2 minutes earlier, I thought about saying, is this just going to become a thing that every time Craig is on, somebody uses the term bae?
Oh, did that happen?
Did you say bae?
It did happen.
Last time?
I said bae last time.
Oh,
did
no.
you? Oh my god!
It's the only time in my life I've ever used that term.
So what you're saying
this
is
might be the only time in my life
my
I've ever
own-
used it.
I have my own radius of suck. And
He's got his radius of bae. Of his millennial jargon there.
Oh, man.
But yeah, if Moiraine's my waifu, Nynaeve is my bae. I'm just going to say that. I love Nynaeve. I've come around so hard on Nynaeve. So that ends up my character discussions, honestly.
Awesome.
We can discuss Matt more next time if you want.
Were there any other characters you wanted to discuss, Craig?
No, I'm good.
No, there
I'm
are
ready
not.
to move on
I'm good.
into deep penetrative lore / miscellaneous and questions.
Well, the deep penetrative lore won't be as deep and penetrating today. We are a little pressed for time, so I'm not going to dive in. But there are just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One of them is that Rand gets a new sword in this book. And it is Justice. It is Arthur Hawkwing's
like the
sword.
sword of justice, defend us.
So yeah, that's I know it's a pretty common question
don't know
in fandom.
how
People
he
are like,
recognized it.
what
I
is
don't
this
get
like random sword that you just got? It is Arthur Hawkwing's old sword.
Where did he get it?
Some people found it like excavating under an old statue.
Huh. All right.
Yeah. And then the other is just to reiterate that we see Quaindiar destroyed by the true power in this segment.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting that the domination band is Quaindiar.
Yeah, and that just is another contextual point for how the seals are weakening and how the seals are being destroyed, because it is the Dark One's power that is capable of destroying Quaindiar.
Yes. So. As far as my miscellaneous here, I just have I just pointed out that I wanted to ask Drew. Craig, you might be able to answer this for me too. There's a moment where Rand promises Hareen Din Togara Tuwins another question, and she leaves and she apparently saves it for another time. I don't remember if she ever got the chance to ask him again. Did she ask him another question ever in the future? Did she take him up on that?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Because I remember seeing her walk away from it this time around. And I was like, wait a second.
I think it was actually a lost epilogue where she's chatting with him and she says, so what was the deal with that pipe? And he just walked away.
Oh, that's gotta be what it was. Or he gave her a raffle. That's what it was.
Ending that Robert Jordan wrote, but Harriet decided that wouldn't be fulfilling enough, so she just cut it herself.
She's loved Galvin's chapter.
Who's the Aiel that they run into?
Nakomi.
Yeah, she's hanging out with Nakomi, and they're both like, "What's up with that pipe?"
They're having a deep heart-to-heart where Nakomi is telling her her life story with all the answers.
It's really sad that nobody else will ever get to read that.
And she's like, and this is exactly how, let me walk you through the steps on how to help Rand al'Thor swap bodies with the Forsaken. And
yeah. This is the first time and only time I ever actually rooted for Gawain when he's fighting his way into the camp, and he just demands an audience with Gareth Bryn. I thought that was pretty cool.
No.
Cool to see him kick ass. What? You didn't like it?
It
was so badass though.
That scene.
I know, but that teenager inside of me was like, oh, that's so cool.
No, there's no such thing as good Gawain.
No.
Oh no! Not even
like
in the Eye of the World when he's so kind to the stranger who shows up over the wall.
Fine. But yeah.
Cadsuane spanking Semiraj. What a what a gem of a scene right there. Like, this is where the first notions in my head of Cadsuane might not actually be so bad started.
And I'm just gonna say, I think, like, Brandon wrote that scene. But I think we all know that Robert Jordan outlined it.
Oh yeah, Brandon did not come up with that scene.
No. Oh, you know what? I'm arguing for Brandon. I think that could have been a very original Brandon scene. That's brilliant, but it's kind of like it's such a stark, startling, cold. I want to say slap in the face. But
let's put it this way: which of these two authors has a long track record of random spankings in his books?
Okay, you know what? That's a good point. Perrin spanking Fire.
And which one of them would be absolutely terrified to put something like that in their book?
Yeah.
Okay, no, you guys make a good case. You guys make a great case.
Pure, unadulterated Robert Jordan.
Okay. In my last miscellaneous point here, finally, the Shan-Chan have had their first encounters with a shadow.
Yes.
My girl Ty Lee coming in there with the Trolloc head. Brought the two on notice after 9 books of the Shan-Chan being a fucking problem. They finally meet the shadow. Finally.
Yeah.
That's it, and that rounds up everything I have to discuss about the Gathering Storm Part 1. I'm ready to head into the final draft. If neither of you have anything else to add,
do it. Kick us off, Rob.
Okay, so I brought to the table today something that I think you're going to appreciate. It's probably the lightest beer I've ever featured. It's only 4.5% ABV. But after reading the name, I knew that this had to be done. This is a session IPA from a brewery that we've definitely featured before. It's called Lake of Bays Brewery. Or Lake of Bays Brewing Company, I should say. And keeping in mind of how much a fan I am of Egwene for this part in particular, this is a tribute to all these sessions that she has been enjoying with Sylviana, where she gets to laugh in the face of her supposed penance. This one is called Paddle On.
Oh,
I
figured that would be about Cadsuane.
I didn't even consider that. Oh my god! Cadsuane spanks Semiraj. I didn't even think about that. What is wrong with me?
I got you.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Nice.
Okay, is this the part where we insert ramble on, like paddle on?
Oh my god! I want Pat to add like a wah 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 wah, just to highlight my failure there. Okay, go ahead. That's what I'm drinking for today.
So yeah, what I'm drinking today is the first of two parts for the first of two parts of this book. The beer I have today is a counterpart to what I will be bringing next week.
Okay.
And these are for Rand. So what I'm drinking today is a stout, a nitro porter infused with vanilla from Station 12 Brewing Company. It's a 5.0%, so not too hefty, not too ridiculous. But it is simply called Dark.
Okay.
And I assume you'll have more to say on the next episode, right, Drew?
I will. Yeah, next week I will bring in the counterpart beer.
Stay tuned, everyone.
It is called Rand. No.
Yeah, right.
Dude, can you imagine? I bring in a beer called Dark Rand.
That would be up there with one key.
Oh, I'm still working on that, by the way.
I bet you are.
Yeah. But, yeah. So I think that brings us to the end of our episode here. This has been... Oh my gosh, what episode is this?
I want to say this is 59 because Knife of Dreams Part 2 was 58.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is episode 59. Next up, we will be going straight into the second half of the Gathering Storm. We will be finishing the book. As always, if you appreciate what we're doing, if you want to get access to all of our bonus content, we have a monthly newsletter, monthly short fiction. We do episodes on general science fiction and fantasy topics and short stories. Check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/inkingoutloud. All of that money goes toward paying our sound engineer and our artist. We really believe in paying people for their work. We're not trying to line our pockets here. So check us out over there. As always, I'm your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yep.
and our very special guest, Craig Hanks.
Yeah, how special are we talking here? I want to quantify this.
The most special.
Like a
Craig.
like a 3 out of 5.
Oh, okay.
Last time I
Alright.
referred to once as Greg. Oh my god.
Yeah, and then you referred to Daniel Green as Craig.
I referred to
believe-
Daniel Green. I called him Craig once on our episode.
Did you
of Warriors
really?
of the
Yeah.
Altai. Yes, I did.
I need to message him and rub that in his face.
Yeah. That was,
yeah. It was
that was one of those
delightful.
moments where, as a host, you just want to melt into the floor and restart time.
Oh, I've had a few of those.
Yeah. So, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.